Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Hope all is well. Just got back from Yam L'Yam. We are on the verge of beginning Ben Azmanim here in Yeshiva, and it is Parshat Vayikra. And I wanted to share with you a few short ideas, which maybe we'll be able to tie together in the Parsha. First, we open up with the beginning of the Parsha. And the Torah tells Vayikra el Moshe, Vayedaber Hashem elav me'oel mo'ed le'mor. So the Rashi's already bothered. Cites a medrash. Why do you have this double lashon? It says Vayikra el Moshe and Vayedaber Hashem elav. So Rashi quotes an interesting medrash which highlights the fact that we all know that in our Sifrei Torah and also reflected in our Chumashim, we have breaks, various periodic breaks in the Chumash in the Torah. They're signified in the Chumash by a samech, a stuma, a pei, a psucha, but we have these breaks in the action. And on this pasuk, we have the break between the end of Sefer Shmos, the beginning of Sefer Vayikra. So comes along Rashi and he says, why is it, what's the purpose of these breaks? Why not just have a continuum? Why do we have these breaks? So Rashi cites the Medrash, and the Medrash tells us that what is the purpose of the breaks? Ma hayu hafsakos mishamshos litain revach lemoshe litbonein bein parsha leparsha ubein inyan leinyan kal v'chomer lehedyot halomed min hahedyot. So Moshe was absorbing a tremendous amount of information from the best teacher of all. Tremendous information, tremendous inspiration. And in order, when you're absorbing so much, so even Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the greatest of all Talmidim, and the Ribbono Shel Olam, who was the greatest of all teachers, Moshe needed to take things slow. He needed periodically to stop and to reflect, to think about what exactly he had just taken in, about what exactly he had just experienced. He needed hefsekos, and therefore the Torah highlights when those hefsekos were taken to tell us that just like Moshe Rabbeinu, who was learning from the Ribbono Shel Olam, he needed breaks, and those breaks were not just stam breaks, but breaks to reflect, to think, to how to absorb, how to inculcate that which has been experienced. So hedyot, halomid min hahedyot, kol shekein. We're on the verge of, in yeshivas, those of us who are in yeshivas, Ben Azmanim. We're moving into a Ben Azmanim period, a vacation period, a break in the action. Those of us who are not in yeshiva, we have perhaps, if we're working, we have a Pesach break coming up, we have vacation periods, we have spring break, whatever the case may be, we always have these breaks in the action. And says the Torah that the breaks serve a very, very significant purpose. Not just to vacation, to vacate, to leave one's environment, but the breaks serve a very affirmative purpose. Because how often do we really stop and think, stop and reflect, consider what we just experienced, how we can build it into ourselves, absorb it into ourselves, make ourselves changed people, better people by that which we experienced. We are so busy, so connected, just moving from thing to thing. We become very much robots, just with this pattern of life that we find ourselves in. And the Torah is telling us that if Moshe Rabbeinu needed these kinds of breaks to absorb, to reflect, to inculcate, so alachas kama v'kama, ordinary people need that as well. How often do you take these breaks? That might depend. I would recommend at least a minute a day. A minute a day to stop, reflect. What did I do today? Did I reach my goals? Did I fail in my goals? How can I do better tomorrow? A minute before you go to sleep, think about what you accomplished that day and how you can make tomorrow even better. Perhaps on a monthly basis, or on a weekly basis. Perhaps that's one of the purposes of Shabbos, to think about my week, to reflect what were the highlights of my week. A great thing to do around your Shabbos table. You have children, small children, bigger children, adults. Think around your Shabbos table. What were the highlights of my week? What was the high point of my week? What a great way to kind of have you think, reflect upon what's going well, what could be going better. Perhaps, in addition, every Rosh Chodesh, to go and have that experience. Obviously, we do it every year, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur time, but I think much more than every year, to do this on a daily basis, certainly on a weekly basis, to think, to use those hefsekos for an affirmative purpose. That's idea number one. Idea number two, we look at Perek Beis, Pasuk Aleph in our Parsha, and the Torah tells us, V'nefesh ki takriv karban mincha laHashem, Soles yeh karbano, v'yatzak alav shem v'nasan alav levona. So the Torah tells us you have a nefesh, a soul, who brings a carbon mincha l'Hashem, soles yeh karbano, a mincha, a carbon of flour. That's the carbon that is brought. When you contrast this to the first carbon that we're introduced to, in the parsha, we're told, Adam, this is the second pasuk of the parsha, Adam ki yakriv miken, carbon l'Hashem min habeima, min habakar, min hatzon, takrivu es carbonechem. And Rashi is already bothered by the change in lashon. When it comes to a carbon of a behema, of bakar, of tzon, in the beginning of the parsha, we're told, Adam ki yakriv miken. When we're told in Perek Beis of a carbon of a mincha, a soulless carbon, a flour carbon, we are told now it's nefesh ki takriv, carbon mincha l'Hashem. Why the change from Adam to nefesh? So Rashi highlights that the key is who is bringing these karbanos. Who has the money to afford a large behema, a very expensive behema, and who's bringing, can't afford that large animal, he's only bringing a morsel of flour as his carbon. So obviously the wealthy person, he's bringing the behema, he's bringing a very significant carbon, costs a lot of money, and a lot is invested in that carbon. The ani doesn't have the money to invest in that carbon, so he has to bring a carbon of soles, a bag of flour. And Rashi says so beautifully, "V'nefesh ki takriv, lo ne'emar nefesh b'chol karbonos nedava, ela b'mincha. Ki mi darko lisnadev mincha." Who's the one who's bringing a mincha? Amrak ani. An ani is the one who's bringing the carbon mincha, the soles. Amrak kadosh baruch hu ma'ale ani alav ki ilu hikriv nafsho. Hashem says to that ani, you don't have the money to bring a fancy razzle-dazzle carbon, but I see you're invested at your level in this carbon. I am ma'ale ani akasav ki ilu hikriv nafsho. It's as if you're sacrificing your nefesh. And at the end of the day, and we all know this to be so true, see the usher, he gets a lot of kavod, gets a lot of respect in our community. He has a lot to offer financially. And indeed, he brings a fancy razzle-dazzle carbon. But sometimes, when we have that wealth, we have that kavod, sometimes it's a lot of window dressing. Sometimes it's a lot of what I'll call the chovas ha'evarim, the duties of the limbs, but sometimes missing the chovas halavavos. Sometimes we see, you know what, look at this carbon, it's unbelievable. And sometimes what Hashem really wants is Rahman Aliba boy. He wants the essence. He wants the heart. As we all know, the carbon is a replacement for the person. So person, yes, we're sacrificing a behema, but it's really me who's on that altar. How often does the Ashir have that feeling? The Ani who has nothing. So he's really bringing himself. That's what he's bringing. A bag of flour. Hashem needs a bag of flour. He's saying to Hashem, I'm bringing myself. This is me. This is all I have. This is all I am. And Hashem understands that. And therefore, it's v'nefesh ki takriv. All too often, we're all focused on the chovas ha'evarim, the externalities of avodas Hashem. And this carbon tells us that Hashem, perhaps most beloved to all, and in a certain sense, the nisayon of the ani in this respect is easier, because he has nothing. So all he has to offer, and what he has to offer is himself, and that offering of himself is so significant, and that is indeed a very core message that we find in the parsha. Last point I want to make, again, and I think it really builds on this prior point as well. We're told a little bit later on in the second parak, Kol hamincha asher takrivu la'Hashem lo te'aseh chametz. In the carbon mincha, no chametz. Ki kol se'or v'chol davash lo taktir mimenu ishel Hashem. You can't have chametz in your mincha, even though it's flour, it's water, so it has the capacity for becoming bread. No, you're not allowed to have chametz. Not only can you not have chametz, you cannot adorn the carbon with dvash, with honey. That you cannot do. However, we are told that when it comes to a carbon mincha, no honey, no seor, no yeast, but rather, pasuk yud gimel, kol carbon minchascha bemelach timlach. You have what we call the bris melach. You bring the carbon with salt. Why not dvash? After all, you have a choice of dvash or salt. Why not the dvash? The dvash is the honey, sweetens it up. Why not the saor? Why not the leavening agent, making it such a more chashuv carbon, a more chashuv offering? So take a look at the Rabbeinu Bachai. Rabbeinu Bachai develops the idea very beautifully that what's represented by chametz is gaiva, is the suor shabeis. The Bali Musar point out it's the Yetzer Hara, and certainly as we're on the heels of Pesach, certainly messages that we want to hear very much. But I want to take it in a slightly different direction. I forget where I heard this idea, but it always stuck with me. I thought it was a very beautiful idea. When we bring that carbon mincha, so you're not allowed to have the leavening agent, you can't have chametz. Okay, we understand. Chametz represents gaiva, represents bad midos, represents a certain puffiness, a certain haughtiness. Again, a Yetzer Hara. Why not dvash? So when we go ahead and spread dvash on something, we're taking an external flavor, a very delicious, very sweet flavor, and we're adorning it onto this substance, and in a certain sense it masks the essence of the carbon and layers on this sweet external layer. Says the Ribono Shalom, says Hashem, says the Torah HaKadosha, when it comes to Avodas Hashem, when it comes to our core avoda, we don't need, and we shouldn't have these foreign elements, even if they're sweet, even if they add a tremendous metikus, but they're foreign. So why salt? You see, what salt does, and the essence of salt, is we know, for example, when we salt meat, what salt does is it takes that which is inherent in the meat and it extracts its inherent, it's an extractor. It takes that which is inherent and draws it out. So the way you kasher meat is you salt the meat and it draws out the blood. When it comes to flavoring meat, you put salt on the meat, and what it does is it draws out the essential flavors of the basar itself, of the meat itself. That's the power. That's what salt does. So the carbon is telling us, yes, put salt on your carbonos, not to mask the essential nature of the carbon, on the contrary, to draw out its essential nature. Because at the end of the day, what the Torah wants from us in the carbonos is not the behema and is not the mincha. What the Hashem wants from us is Rachmana Liba Boy. He wants our heart. I would even argue, in our Avodas Hashem, which is so critical, in all of our mitzvos, what we really have to work on is Rachmana Liba Boy. And therefore, as we take these breaks in the action, to reflect on how invested I am in my Avodas Hashem. Am I just going to shul every day to go ahead and satisfy the checklist of davening 3 times a day, of being at a minyan 3 times a day, or am I in the posture of my essential nature is part of it? I'm that ani of v'nefesh ki takriv. I am that offering that bris, that carbon with the bris melach, where the essence is coming out. My essence is coming out. I am bonding my essential nature with the Ribono Shalom. It's a tremendously ambitious vision, a tremendously ambitious avoda, but one that certainly we can achieve, we can accomplish, and within all the minutiae of the karbanos, there's some beautiful, beautiful messages to take out, and we should all be zoche as we start to move into Nisan and start getting ready for Pesach, to go back to our roots, the Chag HaGeula, where we reunite ourselves, rebond ourselves with Hashem, appreciating the unique hashgacha pratis that we have, and trying to direct our hearts to Avinu Shebashamayim, because after all, Rachmana Liba Boy.